This podcast contains open conversation about eating disorders, body-related issues, and may include triggering language. I'm not a medical professional, just someone who has personally navigated these experiences and wants to create a space for open and compassionate dialogue. If this isn't the right time for you to listen, take care of yourself and come back whenever you're ready. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Bite Size Stories. I'm Giorgia, and this podcast was created to talk about the complex relationship we have with food, body image, and health through honest, lighthearted, and meaningful conversation. In this first episode, we're going to talk about what eating disorders are, why they often begin in childhood, and we're later going to narrow down in bulimia in the specific. And along the journey, I'm going to share my own experience so you can get to know me better. Because yes, I've been through it too, and opening up is the first step to healing, right? Joining me today, it's a mental health counselor specializing in trauma treatment and interested in eating disorders, who's going to help us understanding the why behind these struggles. So welcome, Mary.
Hi, Giorgia. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here today.
Would you like to share something about yourself?
Of course. So, as you mentioned, I'm a mental health counselor in the New York State, and I
Eating disorders.
So when we think about eating disorders, so what comes first is eating disorders are unhealthy relationship with food. So it's either like you eat too much or too little in an unhealthy way. And there are a bunch of eating disorders which you can find the most common, so which we are going to go through today. And those are pica disorder, restrictive food intake disorder, rumination disorder, anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder.
Okay, so let's say that we have 5 main eating disorders. Even if answering to this question, I feel like it's always very hard to say what are eating disorders, because as you well know, there are many characteristics of them. But let's say that the main one are anorexia, bulimia, pica disorders, rumination disorders, and atypical anorexia and binge eating.
Yep.
All right.
Absolutely right.
All right. I think in my when I started developing eating disorders when I was younger, now it's a decade ago, understanding the terminology and the symptoms of each eating disorder helped me a lot in understanding what was going on with me in my body and in my mind in general. So before knowing the terminology, everything was kind of messed up. I didn't understand. And then I do remember this sense of relief the first time that someone, which in my case was my therapist, when she told me, you have bulimia. And she did that in a totally normal way, just like medical term. And that made me very relieved, because after that I was able to look at the symptoms and reflect myself in that, and understanding that I wasn't the only one. If there is a term for that, it means that other people are in my same position. So yeah, understanding the terminology and the symptoms of eating disorder, I think it's very important for people to understand where they position themselves and how to heal from that. That kind of brings us, I think, to another topic, which is very common. I mean, I get a lot of questions like that from my friends, from people I know in general. And it's, why do we develop eating disorders? I get asked this question a lot of times. And it's hard to answer. But I'm sure there are some common patterns in people with eating disorders. So I would like you to, kind of talk
To
about
elaborate
it. Elaborate on that.
So let's maybe start with eating disorders, like just giving a little bit characteristics to each of them, and then like why. I love your questions, to be honest. They are absolutely reasonable, and if we are talking about anorexia nervosa, for example, those are that's something important to know for people. For example, when they start like to starve and gaining like this fear of getting weight, that can be something as an indicator. Thinking about bulimia, that's a little bit different because with people with bulimia, they kind of like perform binge eating. That means they eat a lot of food at one like set, and then they try to get rid of that food, which calls purging. So if we are speaking about binge eating disorder, so those are characterized as eating a lot of food at one set and then don't trying to get rid of that food. Just like keeping it. Less common eating disorders, it's restrictive food intake, restrictive disorder when people, for example, have some problems with eating specific food, for example, like because of the shape, of color, fear of choking, or something like that. So that's everything goes into this category. And pica disorder, when people eat something unusual, for example, they can eat dirt, paper, grass, or something like that. And it's been found mainly in people who has autism spectrum disorder or like in pregnant women. Coming back to your question
Yeah,
about
like, where are the roots?
where are the roots? So there are many things why it might happen. So there are like physiological reasons, psychological reasons, and societal also reasons. If we talk about physiological reasons, that might happen that people have develop any eating disorder because they have like hormone imbalance, or for example they have genetic predisposition. For example, like they have like in the family something like somebody was diagnosed with anxiety disorder or a depressive disorder. Those can be connected to later on like onset of developing eating disorder. If we talk about trauma, eating disorders have been linked to the earliest childhood experiences, like traumatic experiences like emotional abuse, physical abuse, and sexual abuse. So, and then later on, people try to kind of get rid of their painful memories and kind of gain this control, and they just like involve in eating disorders. And societal, it's about, of course, it depends on the culture. For example, in many cultures, it's like a very common, like thinner is better or something like that. And of course, people might feel, especially people who are not fitting in that frame of beauty, so they might feel very uncomfortable and try to perform specific behavior, for example, and feel like they are dissatisfied with their body just to be like acceptable in their society where they live.
Yeah, I think all of them are equally important and in different way can really shape the way we relate to food. Starting from trauma brings you to a state of anxiety that you kind of bring with you for your whole life. It could be any kind of trauma that you maybe had in your childhood, and that's going to reflect into your anxiety. And unfortunately, a lot of people put their anxiety into food because of an emotional regulation or emotional regulator, actually. And I do think societal pressure, it's a thing today. It has always been a thing, to be honest. And I totally relate to that. I totally relate in general to everything you've said, but I would say that is a big thing because we're humans and we get totally compromised by what people around us say. Even if we have the strongest personality, we're going to be influenced by what people say around us. And I do relate with that. I mean, I come from a culture where people have a strong relationship with health and healthy food, living healthy and healthy lifestyle. And so that reflects also in the way people behave toward food. And I think in my family was of course like that because it was just like that, like around in our culture. And I think it's amazing to grow up your kids in a healthy environment. But I also did realize other circumstances around me that were less healthy. So for example, I'm not talking about my family, I'm talking in general. A lot of comments, a lot of body talks, a lot of, just like comments about the way your body looks, the way your body should be, the thinner, the better, you said. And I'm talking about when I was a kid, when I think everything started for me, psychologically at least. And I think that was a huge factor because at that time is the time where you kind of develop your sense of understanding of the environment around you. And I do remember this thing of thinking about my other friends, and maybe they were thinner, maybe they were different from me, and I remember this thing that I got so upset every time because they used to eat a lot of snacks, a lot of like very good snacks, and they were very thin. And in my house, like we didn't like keep any kind of snack. But I do remember thinking, why do they eat whatever they want and they're so thin? And I don't know. I eat like balanced food, healthy food. I'm not allowed to eat like those kind of like bad snacks, and I'm so plump. That got me so mad, not because of my I was thinking that, but because I started hearing comments from other people, of course. So like from my other friends. That was when I was already a little bit older. But those comments are hard to accept. They can make you feel really bad when they look at you and they tell you you're fat, you're bad, you're big, you shouldn't wear this, that doesn't fit you. And that's a hard thing to go through. And I think for me was one of the strongest reason I developed an eating disorder. My therapy journey started 4 years ago. I'm glad I started it. I'm really glad because today I'm feeling way better. But my symptoms started when I was, let's say, when I was 13 to 14 years old. They started with an anorexic behavior. So after being bullied for my body shape and for my kilos, I started cutting food at all, and I developed those purging behaviors or compensatory behaviors we were talking about, exercising like obsessively, and losing weight, of course. And what surprised me was that the comments that came were, of course, like positive comments, like, "Oh, you lose weight." Like, haven't you realized that I lost like so many kilos in like 2 months? Like, there must be something wrong with that. So that's something that surprises me today in general. But what to say, Mary? I mean, I feel like back then and today, now and today as well, unfortunately, people, including parents, including families, the lovely they can be, but there is not enough information around eating disorders and body related issues. So sometimes I think for people it's hard to understand that certain type of comment can be triggering. And I understand that it can be hard because it's hard sometimes also for me. Sometimes I do comment to myself that are triggering. So, it's hard. So I understand. Do you think childhood has actually something to do with the development of eating disorders?
I think it depends which kind of childhood. So there are, of course, some situations which might contribute into developing eating disorders in children. And I think, as you mentioned, like that comments of like parents' comments, that can be something really harmful. It depends, for example, how you express that comments. And also, if you have a very nice intention, for example, to talk about like body image of your child, so that's something important. For example, if with the nice intention, that can be harmful for your child. So in this case, another thing, you are absolutely an example, role model for your child, how to behave toward food, which attitude to have toward food. And of course, for example, if you would like your child, if you see that your child is gaining weight and you would like to do something about that. So the best way is to yourself to be an example, bringing your child to do some exercises together, for example, or do some sport activities with your child and enjoy together, thinking about food yourself and like implementing healthy foods into your daily life. So that is something that you can do about it.
Yeah, like modeling kind of to your kids, the right behavior toward food from the beginning, avoiding comments, avoiding neglecting. I think also that's very important. Okay, I'm gonna share this like short story, but it's all to kind of prove the point that I think often our symptoms are the same as the one that we had in our childhood, or we kind of develop the same behaviors that we had in the childhood. And for me, it was like that. So basically, when I was a kid, of course, like I told you, like in my house, we didn't take like those kind of sugar. We had different kind of food, and but I used to love them so much because everyone was like eating them. So of course, like as a kid, I started to hide them, like to just like go to my friend's house, like take whatever snack I could bring it home, and I did into my toys boxes, and of course then eat them when I was alone and nobody was looking at me. But then of course I don't know, I developed this behavior of all keeping the like the plastic envelopes of snacks or food in general, of keeping them in the toys boxes. And I think it was, I don't know, it was kind of a way to remember, I don't know, remember that food, or just like keeping it. I mean, as a child, it was of course like an innocent thing to do. But then I don't know, I realized it was like a crazy thing when I realized that I was doing that until maybe like 3 years ago. Every time I binged, I bought like food, eat it, and then keep it in a safe place, in a box. Like in my room, in my house, I used to have like wall boxes and bags of just like plastic envelopes or food envelopes in general, just for me to remember that I had to punish myself in some way. Like you did this, like don't forget that you did that. Don't forget that you ate that food. Now you gotta look at it and keep it here. So, something that started as a child, like a childish, innocent thing, then became one of my, strongest symptoms and strongest way to relate to food, just like holding everything there. So I think it's important for parents to try to teach their kids that there is not a bad food or there is not a good food. We need to try everything.
And also about neglect, don't neglect your child's emotion, because
Yeah.
also it's been found in people with eating disorders, when they were children, so they were neglected, like emotional neglected. And that's something also to look at, just if your child, like how do they feel, what's happening in their life, like being more involved. And mostly children, they don't identify their emotions, so you as adult can help them just naming them. You feel upset right now, but I'm with you, we are going to work through this, or something like that. So that might be also helpful.
I think you hit a good point, like a really strong point, because not recognizing emotions, I think sometimes can bring you to anxiety. When you don't recognize what's going on, you can have anxiety. I think that's something that it's really recurrent also in people with bulimia. This source of anxiety toward food, toward themselves, that then bring them to regulate their emotion into eating. Because if you don't know how to regulate your emotion because you didn't learn to recognize them, then you need to put them somewhere else. And unfortunately, for most of the people, it's food. I think for me it was kind of like that as well. When I started recognizing my first symptoms of bulimia, which was the first time I was living far from my family, so I didn't have any restriction toward food. But then my purging behavior started because my feeling was coming from a restricting behavior that I had myself. When I started eating and overeating, I started thinking, okay, now I need to do something. I cannot keep this food into my body because that makes me anxious even more than before. So I need to put this food somewhere else, which is not inside my body. I can talk for experience. I can talk because I met a lot of people with my same problems. But what's very common in bulimia, it's having, and also in anorexia actually, it's this thinking like, I don't deserve happiness, I don't deserve joy, I don't deserve this food. It's all about a struggle with your sense of worth, and you put that into food.
Eating disorder can be as a coping mechanism, just to cope. I agree with you, like when you don't recognize your emotions, for example, or you are dealing with difficult emotions, so that can be absolutely coping mechanism, just because you can control your food intake and you can control your binging and purging behavior.
It's really all a cycle, which I call it the cycle of shame. I cannot ask you how to break this cycle of shame, but maybe you can give us some insight on how to, take the first step.
It's not very easy to break this cycle of shame, but it's possible. The first step could be like to acknowledge that, like, oh, I have this, and absolutely I need to do something with that. For example, telling somebody, like picking somebody from your family or from somebody whom you trust, friends or anybody around whom you really trust, and talk to that person, saying, I have this thing, so can I talk to you about it?
One advice that I have is when you binge, if you have a binging episode, after that, try to think about what happened during the day, what's happening in this period of your life, what were you thinking before having that episode. That's going to be something that it's already going to help you a lot understanding why you binged. And then, of course, there are many associations or things people can do to to take the first step to healing. Can you suggest some of them, or can you suggest some methods, some ways people can take the first step into healing process?
Absolutely, Georgia. And I think you gave a very nice advice for people, because taking like one step at a time, that's very important. Like not thinking about that you have to deal with all of this behavior today and that's it. Because that's going to be like very stressful, but taking one step at a time, thinking about your emotions through day, and then like being in control of today, not what you've done yesterday, and taking, for example, 90 steps towards your recovery. And then you can think, for example, like, oh, today is my first day, and today I can do something in these 90 days, and not like, or today or nothing or never, Yeah, there are also like so many things you can do about it. First of all, as I mentioned, you can talk to somebody whom you trust, just to kind of like break a little bit this cycle of shame. And then you can look for professional help, for example, for a psychologist or for coach in eating disorders who is really specialized and who can help you to deal with that. You can work also with a nutritionist who is specialized in eating disorders. Because people with eating disorders, especially with bulimia, they usually think all the time about food, what they're going to eat, how much they're going to eat, what they're going to cook, or etc., etc. If we talk about organizations, there are a bunch of them, like where you can participate into free group therapies.
There is ANAD, there is NIDA, there is National Alliance of Eating Disorder. There are a lot of people out there who understands you. People around you, people who love you, they're gonna support you. Maybe they're not gonna understand what you're going through, but they're gonna support you. So I think, as you said, that's the first step, just like opening up with people you trust. And maybe second step would be getting into therapy. As Mary said, there are a bunch of people out there who are willing to help, so don't be scared to share it. You're not alone. You're not carrying this weight alone. And there are a lot of people like you out there who have stories to share. So Mary, just on a closing point, just to wrap up in a lighter way,
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna list some common phrases people often say. They are real, by the way, like real phrases by people just like hearing at a dinner table, a
Okay.
cocktail party, or in like WhatsApp groups. Okay, I'm gonna list them, and you're gonna say, is it a red flag or not necessarily?
Okay.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah, I am
to
ready.
play? All right. I feel so bad today. I had pizza and ice cream.
That's a red flag, because it's kind of like you feel bad because you eat something and you're kind of like body shaming yourself. Like,
I always wait myself in the morning before I eat anything.
it depends on the context, but it's something common which has been related to eating disorders. So I would say it's a red flag for me.
I skip breakfast. It makes me feel lighter throughout the day.
It depends with which like intention you do this. If you do with an intention to lose weight or like maintain specific shape or like body shape, so that can be a red flag.
So not necessarily, let's say.
Yeah.
Okay. I only eat clean during the week, then I cheat on the weekends. Red flag or not
That's a
necessarily?
red flag.
Red flag? Okay.
Yeah, that's a red flag because you're differentiating food for good and bad.
No carbs after 6 p.m. That's my rule. Red flag.
I would say red flag.
I follow fitness influencer for meal inspiration.
I think that also might depend on the context. If they're talking like about, oh, you have to be like this standard, that can be a red flag.
If I eat something bad, I just make sure to burn it off later. Red flag or not necessary.
It's not necessary.
So, Mary, thank you so much for playing with me, and thank you for taking part of the very first episode of Bite Size Stories and sharing with us a lot of precious insights.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be part of this story.
Thank you. And just to close it off, if you enjoyed this episode, follow us on social media, on YouTube, and in all the podcast platforms. Share it to a friend who might be going through similar experiences and leave us a comment. Remember, your opinion matters. And if you enjoyed the first episode of Bite Size Stories, follow us for other episodes coming up. See you next time.